being sued by his own mother over some messy money-related drama to revealing how he tricks sellers into coming down to his price. This is the truth behind Rick Harrison from Pawn Stars. Okay, I'm sure we've all heard the whole controversy involving Mrs. Harrison by now. Joanne Harrison, Rick's 81-year-old mother, is suing him for nearly all that he's worth. That doesn't sound like a motherly thing to do, now does it? But according to the elderly woman's attorney, Leanne Wakayama, Joanne's at her wit's end with Rick. According to court documents, she's been burned by Rick far too many times to count now. It started back in 2001, when Joanne was placed in a medically induced coma following a health scare, and Rick made her sign a document transferring over her shares in the gold and silver pawn shop to him. Joanne claims that she didn't really understand what she was signing back then, but since her son and husband were encouraging her to do it, she trusted them. Cut to a few days later, and she realizes she's just signed over all of her shares, that's a 51% stake, to Rick. Wakayama claims that Joanne wanted to take her son to court right then and there, but Richard Harrison acted as a mediator of sorts, and they finally agreed that Rick would give her a share in his earnings from the shop, and that the old man's shares would be transferred solely to Joanne when he died. The old man passed away at the age of 77 in 2017, and sure enough, all 49% of his shares in the world-famous pawn shop were transferred in his wife's name. But that didn't stop Rick from assuming complete control, though. Now, technically, Joanne and Rick should be almost equal partners in this, right? Then how come she hasn't seen a single penny in profit since 2020? According to her attorney, Joanne, despite being burned once already, decided to trust her son again and allowed him to run the pawn shop like he wanted to without her butting in, but that he'd give her $25,000 a month for living expenses. If you think that's steep, you need to remember that not only does the star of Pawn Stars make millions a year, but that Joanne requires 24-hour care and has several medical issues, so her total expenses with it all come up to close to $20,000 anyway. Rumor has it that Rick deferred payment once COVID-19 hit, and according to the Daily Mail, the pawn shop that racks in millions a year made a modest $34,000 all year during COVID. So Rick had an excuse back then, but it's been 2 years since, and Joanne thinks it's time her son pays up. According to Wakayama, Joanne is traumatized by the fact that her son continues to live comfortably, while she's struggling to put money together every month for her living expenses. She's also scared that Rick's about to sell off more of the family's assets, which is why she's filed for a restraining order against her own son. I swear, this just keeps getting messier and messier. Joanne's requesting a court-ordered accounts reading of all the money Rick's made since Richard's death, because according to her, nearly $500,000 and some silver that the old man made throughout his life and left for Joanne is missing. Like I said, not the most maternal thing to do, but it really looks like it's been a long time coming for Rick. On that note, actually, let's hear what the star of Pawn Stars has to say about all of this. So, naturally, Rick's denying any wrongdoing. If anything, he's alleging that his mother's being manipulated by someone, and he knows who it is, but won't name any names for now. Okay, fair enough. Rick also claims that the restraining order isn't placed into effect just yet, and that he's been trying to contact his mother for months, but her phone is either turned off or that secret someone keeps Joanne from sitting down and talking to Rick. He says that he has an answer for just about everything that the court order alleges, but that before he takes it all to the media, he'd like to sit down and talk to his mom. I guess Joanne's not very receptive to that idea, though. So, to the media it is, and we'll be waiting for more news on the whole fiasco. While that's going on, let's talk about some other controversies Rick's been a part of. I have a good one to kick things off. Did you know that the oldest Harrison son actually admitted to helping pimps make bail? Yeah, it almost seems like I'm making it up, right? But nope, Rick said it out loud and clear. In an interview, the Pawn Stars star detailed just how him and his contemporaries in the pawning industry would do it. So, when you get arrested, the cops confiscate all the cash you have on your person. If you're suspected of making that money illegally, more often than not, pimps aren't running around with clean money, but you know what they can't confiscate? Jewelry. So, they'll have one of their associates come into the pawn shop to pawn off their gold against a loan and then use that money to post bail. It was almost terrifying how casually Rick was telling interviewers all of this. Almost like he found it amusing, because the loan you give them against their gold is only worth half of the total price. It's literally a steal. The famous pawn shop owner really didn't think it was that big of a deal. If someone finds Rick's moral compass, could they please give it back to the guy? And if you thought that was infuriating, wait till you hear what they did to Olivia Black. Now, granted, Rick didn't fire Black. In fact, she decided to walk out on her own, but he sure didn't help her either. I'll explain it all in a second. You probably know by now that Austin Chumlee Russell was arrested years ago for felony drug and illegal weapons possession. Rick was by his side through the whole thing. He made sure that despite the controversy that was sure to hit the stars of Pawn Stars, he was by his friend and co-worker's side to help him through it all. Eventually, the charges against Chumlee were reduced, and he was back to working behind the counter in no time. Now, all of this was pretty weird, considering how the History Channel expects the stars to maintain a family-friendly appearance off camera too, and Chumlee's arrest was anything but that. Many believe that one of the major reasons why the network didn't give him the boot was because Rick stepped in. Okay, but if he was willing to put his career on the line for Russell, why didn't he do the same for Olivia? Piggybacking on the whole family-friendly thing, the History Channel found out that one of the show's budding stars, Black, used to do softcore porn back in the day. They immediately took her off the air, but she was still working at the store, like she'd done before the series started in 2009. Rick didn't stand up for her back then. Sure, he didn't really fire her or anything, but you'd think he'd do more for someone he seemed to get along great with. In the end, Black felt like not only was her privacy invaded, but that she was being iced out by the rest of the group, to the point that working at Gold and Silver Pawn Shop just didn't seem fun anymore. Okay, yeah, so the guy doesn't really have a spotless record, sure, but that doesn't take away from the fact that he's one of the best in the business. He spilled a few of his secrets in License to Pawn. In his semi-biographical debut book, Rick talks about what really goes on inside of a pawn shop owner's mind. He talked about how to make killer deals and how to basically trick sellers into giving them their antiques for cheap. How does he do it? It's simple. Rick never makes the first offer. So the pawn shop owner makes sure that he keeps his interest hidden whenever he sees something he knows is worth a lot of money. He never makes the first bid because, according to him, if you start off at a higher number than what the seller had in mind, you're basically losing money without knowing it. That's pretty solid advice, actually. Rick's used his own advice quite a few times when he bought his most expensive item to date, Maurice Sendak's original sketches from Where the Wild Things Are that he bought for a whopping $250,000. He's also paid $95,000 for a 1932 Lincoln Roadster, one of the first cars to have ever existed. But he's also walked away from quite a few deals too, like the time he decided against buying an original three-piece suit worn by George Washington. Why? Because Rick understood its resale value, which was still high, but would cut into what he'd paid for the whole ensemble since the seller was asking for $3 million. And Rick was only prepared to give him $2.5 million for it. But hey, he still considers saving money on even the best of deals a win. So, from revealing how he tricks sellers into coming down to his price, to being sued by his own mother over some messy money-related drama, this was the truth behind Rick Harrison.